I recorded this video on TikTok, which has, at the time of this recording, over 600,000 views. And I did it just to show my resume. The resume format that I've been using for most of my career. It's modeled after a Linux man page, and it was something that I saw someone else do, and I really liked it. And because I've been a system administrator and a systems engineer for a very long time, I'm familiar with the format. And so I modeled it after theirs and did the whole thing in HTML. You can see my resume at justingarrison.com/resume, and feel free to copy the format if you like. But overwhelmingly, the question that everyone had in that video was something I just casually mentioned, was that I've been tracking my resume revisions and applications in Git. I use Git to track all of the versions of resumes that I've had because I typically customize them for the jobs I'm applying for. So this video is to show you how I do that and to give you some examples on how you can get started too. To help you understand how this works, I made a new open source project called Track Your Resume in Git. And all it is an example of what I've learned over time of tracking my resume for the past 10 years in Git. And my first commit tracking my resume was not fancy like this. I didn't have any process. I just wanted to track a revision. And I was doing it with Word docs. I made my resume in a Word doc, and then I put it in a folder and I said git init, git add, and git commit. And that's all I did. I had no planning around that. And Word docs are not great to track in Git because they're binary. They're not line by line. They're not something you can diff. But over time, I kind of realized that that's okay. I didn't need all of the code and Git diffability that you might get for what it's normally used for. I just wanted to be able to track different versions and maybe see and search those things over time. I've filled this repo with dummy data just to give you a sense of what it might be like to track your applications and resume in Git. And you can see here I use branches pretty heavily. And I'm going to explain how these work. I just wanted to show you roughly what's going on in the repository. So down here we can see these are the original commits I have of just updating and making my resume. This isn't something that I applied for. This is just, hey, I put a new resume in here. I changed some wording, some format, something like that. And that goes on the main branch. The main branch is where the main formatting that I have comes into play. Whenever I apply to a new company, I make a branch for that company. And so you'll see here, I have a branch over here. This one's called Pixar. So again, this is all dummy data, but if I applied for Pixar, I would make this branch. I have another one over here for Google. And so from main, I made these two branches that went off, and now I can track any application that go to those companies. I also made a branch here called SWE, role-SWE, for a software engineer. So if I want to apply for software engineering roles, I may tailor the format or the wording or something on that resume specific for that type of job. My relevant work history for a software engineering role is going to be different than some of the other roles. So I'm going to have a branch that's role-something. You can see here for software engineer, there's one here for management. I have one for SRE and a syseng. All of these different roles are different types of resumes. So I can track those changes, and whenever I want to apply for that type of role at a new company, I can take the resume from the top of that role branch and put it on top of the company branch. And so I know at that point, I've applied for that role at that company. This visually looks a little bit complex because it happens over time. And again, this is a fake repository that you can go look through, but it's faked out to be maybe 4 years of different applications for different companies in different roles. I can go into the repository and look at the normal Git log for that repository. And you can see here the branches that go off to different things, such as this role DevOps, role syseng, all of those types of things, as well as the company branches here. Anytime I apply for a job, I make the commit apply and then whatever company and role it was. And that just helps me search for those things inside of the Git history so I can find out when I last applied for these things and then figure out what the job actually was. So let's quickly walk through a scenario of what it might look like to apply for a new job at a new company. I found this job at OpenAI, and that seems like a fun job to apply for. It's a software engineer for infrastructure for supercomputing. There's supercomputing clusters. We look through it, we say, hey, that sounds like a great fit for me. I'm going to go ahead and apply. So inside of Git, I'm going to go ahead and make a new branch for the company because I've never applied at OpenAI before in this example repo. So I can use a git switch C, which will create a new branch if it doesn't exist and switch to it if it already does. And something to be mindful of when I'm doing this is I was on the main branch and I don't actually know what the resume was for main. I don't know if that was a software engineering role. I don't know what that was. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull my resume from my software engineering branch over to this branch so that I can have the correct software engineering resume. And one of the things I do that make this really easy is I always name my resume whatever I'm working on. I have one that's a PDF that I submit, which is the artifact, and then I either have like a markdown file or a document file, something that is the same thing, but it's always named my name. And so that I can know I'm pulling that file from this other branch here. So I don't need to rename it over and over again. A lot of times when you're trying to track different versions, you have an underscore company or version or whatever. This is the latest version of my software engineering resume that I'm going to pull in and just put it in this branch. Here you can see all the other files that are in this branch. And if I do a git diff, there was no changes. So my main branch was my software engineering, the same resume. It didn't actually matter though, because that would still overwrite it and I can make changes now. So let's make a random change to this and say, I do stuff. All right, we're going to edit our resume for this particular job at this time. So we know this is going to be tailored for that application. And this is a benefit of making your resume in something like Markdown, where I can see the line differences. If I was doing this in Word, I wouldn't be able to see that because it's a binary file to Git, but I would still see the file has changed. So it's still useful in the way that I can know something else has changed, and maybe I can look at my commit messages to make sure I know which commit I'm at. So I made that change, but I don't actually remember how to render this into a PDF. It's a Markdown file. So on each of the branches, usually with each type of resume I have, if I'm changing the format, I'm probably using a different tool. So I keep a readme.txt in the role branch. And so I can see what I was using at the time to generate that resume. And I'm using this ohmycv.app. So I can open the app, I can paste in the markdown, and I can generate the PDF over here with the export PDF. You can use whatever tools and generators you like. This is just the one that I used for this dummy application. So I'm going to use the web app, export to the PDF. And again, I'm always going to name it the same thing. So I don't have to think, oh, what's it called on this branch or which version would I want to track it there? It's always named the same thing. I can replace it. Git tracks the versions for me. Now that I'm done editing my resume, I can apply for the job. I can go ahead and go through the application process, whatever it is online. And I can see here in the Git status, I have the markdown file, which is the source, the PDF, which is what I actually submit, and this README that I pulled in from the other branch. And the last thing I want to track in this commit is actually what the job was, because those are something that's always ephemeral and there's no way to go back and look at what was that role I actually applied for, who was it with. All those details usually get lost because almost all of these websites don't keep track of them. They go away as soon as the job's fulfilled, and I didn't really like that. So I commit all of the job postings into Git as well. Now I use just, which is a command runner. And so I have a just file, which will create my JD with my job description, and it'll make a PDF, and it takes in a variable called URL. And then it runs this Docker container that has headless Chrome in it, and it just prints to PDF. And so I give it a URL and it's going to go fetch the website and print it to a PDF. So I can take this URL for the job description and I will run this just JD with my URL. And we'll see here that it wrote out the JD PDF. And if I open it, I'll see that it obviously is the web page for the job I just applied for. And so now I actually have the full cycle of commit of what I applied for. I have the resume I used, the changes I made to it, as well as the PDF, the artifact that I submitted. I have the job description and this README that I pulled over. And now I can commit those changes. Again, whenever I'm applying for a job, I have apply at the beginning of the commit just so I can find them easier. And I'm on the OpenAI branch for this company. So if I ever apply to more jobs at OpenAI, I can go back to this branch and pull in whatever role I want on top of this and overwrite those things so I can see all the jobs I've applied for. Now we commit and push that to our branch, and we can see over here in GitHub that it is asking me to merge those. I don't ever merge company branches on top of main. I only merge role branches into main because those are like my common formats. Whatever type of job I'm going for at the time, that's what's more going to be aligned with what I want to have in main. But you don't actually have to use the main branch. You don't have to do any of this. This is just what I've found works great for me. There is one glaring gap here in this whole process, and that's for like job sites like LinkedIn. Most of these job sites will have their own portals. They'll have these things like easy apply, which don't actually take anything that I need to do locally. I'll have a saved resume already in the system. And how do I track when I apply for those jobs? So most of the time in these sort of portals, I will have a resume for each type of job I'm looking for. Again, these are the latest role version that'll likely be generic because they're not company specific, but I'll have one for jobs that I typically want to apply for. Software engineering, platform engineering, something along those lines, maybe management. And I'll have a few different resumes in the system that I can just pull from for these easy apply buttons. But after I apply, I still do want to track when I applied for them. And so what I typically do on something like LinkedIn, where I can't export this as a PDF easily, I will click the share button and copy the link. And the link will give me a more permanent URL. I don't know if these actually change or not, but it's been working for me okay so far. So I can take this URL and typically I'll email it to myself just so I can know I need to commit this later. And so the email is just a record for myself on the job I applied for and the date I applied for it. Based on the role information, I probably know what resume I used. So later on, when I'm back at my computer, I can take that URL. I'll go ahead and I'll make the branch for the company. And I usually do that by switching from main first and then going to the branch from main. And I already know that main is based on the software engineering role, so I'm probably not going to have to change that. I have this new cybercoders branch, and the PDF is going to be the one that's probably already stored in LinkedIn. So I don't need to change all of that stuff, but the thing I do want to change is the job description. And if I feed the URL to my just shortcuts, you'll see that I actually fail to fetch that URL because I have to log into LinkedIn, and I'm not doing that with. So the only other thing that I typically do in this case is I will delete the PDF, the old job description that was tracked, and I will put the URL to the job I just applied for in a jd.txt. I can see that I deleted the PDF. I have a new text file. And then I can commit that with a message that I applied. There's a little bit of back and forth if I'm on my phone and applying to a lot of jobs, but that's not really typical for me. I usually am doing that at my computer where I can have access to the Git repo already. And the only way that I've found to keep track of when I'm applying for these jobs is literally just to send myself an email or some reminder so I know the URL and the date, and then I can go back through and I can commit that into GitHub later. And I can go back through and commit that into Git later. One last scenario that might happen for you, or maybe not, is if you apply to jobs in person or you apply through a referral program or email someone directly. In those cases, I'm probably going to do a similar thing where I'm going to put something in the jd.txt and I'm going to note either someone I talked to, a person's name, or an email address, and put some basic information because not all of those jobs will have some sort of job description. So this is just something that helps me remember when I applied, who I applied for, and roughly the company or role it was for. Because I'm on a company branch and I have the resume and PDF that I submitted for that job application, it gives me enough context to remember some scenarios. The jd.txt is just for me to remember what the job was about or something to help me know this is when and why I might have been interested and applied for that job. And that's it. That's the whole process. I try to keep it as lightweight as possible. A lot of these things have changed over time as I've learned more about how I wanted to track things and what exactly I was looking for. I've tried things like tag-based approaches for applications and various other things, but I liked having the original job description, and keeping a commit in a clean history made it really easy for me to go back and search the Git commit and then find the exact job that I was applying for in the past. I highly recommend you track whatever it is you are tracking, you track it with Git because it just makes the resume revision history so much easier, and you don't need to have all these weird names and try to remember where you left that file. For me, all of my resumes are always in Git. I can check it out on any of my computers. In a pinch, I can even log into the web interface and just download the PDF that's committed in Git to my phone to be able to email to someone or show them. If you use something else to track your resumes, I'd love to hear about it. If you have suggestions for improvements, please leave a comment below or send a pull request or issue over on GitHub. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you again soon.